Ms. Rector, you were just down there as part of the student group that was down there, and we heard the gentleman from the documentary saying, one of the things to do is to rebuild. What were you seeing in terms of participating, trying to help in this recovery? What was Maryville involved with?
Well, we all split up into groups, and my particular group went to a house, and we actually got to meet the owners of the house, and that was really cool to meet them. And they were very grateful that we were working on their house, and we really enjoyed being there and helping out. And we did some drywalling and painted the entire upstairs of this house, and we took pictures, before and after pictures. I mean, it was a really good experience. And I was just going to say, I know that, there's still a lot that needs to be done down there, but I think, like that guy was saying, you can almost look at it as a positive thing, that these people are rebuilding their communities, and obviously they need lots of help to rebuild it, but that kind of gives them a sense of purpose to help rebuild their community or their home. And, that could be big for some of the people down there to have that opportunity, if they do, to do that.
I was in New Orleans visiting my family over the Christmas break, and I did go visit the Ninth Ward just to see what was happening, because I had visited it again probably in 2006 when there were just those pink tents that Brad Pitt had put up in the Ninth Ward. Now there are homes built, and he has certainly been responsible for many of those. They are not the typical New Orleans architecture, but they are going to withstand any hurricanes that we will have. And I think if we continue to do that with the input of the people who want to live there and who still owned property there, this can be a positive. I think the musicians in the city and musicians all over the world have contributed to bring the musicians back, and many of them did live there, help rebuild those homes. And I think the public schools, as you saw, that were probably the worst in the nation, maybe not, but I think most people there thought they were. The public schools in the city, not in the other parishes, but they have all become charter schools now. And because of that, we have seen great strides in the schools. And it's not now an elitist type of structure where if you live in a certain place, your public school is good, but if you live in another place, your public school is awful. So I think there is there's a great positive that is coming from this recovery, and I hope it continues, and I think it will.
So much of what I've learned since Hurricane Katrina came from individual responsibility. And there's a lot of people in this room, and I wish everybody could go to New Orleans or Biloxi and help rebuild, but in reality we all have our own lives. So what I would ask is, what can you do in your life that you learned from this book? Whether it's going downtown and working on a habitat rebuild here in St. Louis, that would help. Whether it is being nicer to the McDonald's clerk who rides the bus to work every day because they are living at the poverty level, I would ask each of you to think about what you can learn from the book that you can instill in your everyday life.
I think there are numerous things that we've also learned. Education was one of the places that I wanted to focus too, but I think the other thing that is brought to our attention is the need for the coastal restoration, that our wetlands serve as a barrier to protect us from these kinds of storms, and that we have to take some responsibility for our environment and for reconstructing the wetlands of Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama. And for those of us who live there, we take that very seriously. There are lots of projects going on in schools where kids are planting trees on the coast as part of their way to try to rebuild Louisiana. I think the other thing that's really important is this question of citizenship and taking one's responsibility seriously to vote, to be involved in government, to be involved in wherever you live. You never know when the disaster is going to hit you. And you want to make sure that you have competent leadership. I think we need to also take a look at some of the rhetoric that's part of our politics at the moment, and whether or not that is serving us well, and whether or not government is at the service of people, or is it just a bunch of rhetoric at times. And I have to ask myself that seriously. And I want to say that I think Katrina made me a better citizen, because I realized that I needed to take more responsibility for the areas in which I live. And I guess my last thing would be, don't forget about places like New Orleans. We're 5 years from that hurricane, but it's not gone and it's not forgotten. The two of us have moved from New Orleans, but I promise you that it's gone away in our lives. We send people to work, we go ourselves. It's a constant rebuilding and a constant trying to create hope where there wasn't any hope. And I guess the last thing is, I think we need to look at the structures of racism and classism, not just in Louisiana and in New Orleans, but in other places too. We're just fortunate that a disaster pointed out to us our flaws, and now we get the chance to do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, the book ends on a fairly ambiguous note in terms of what the future holds. I mean, in many ways, the way that the book works is that for about the first half, we know that the storm is coming, and of course the family doesn't, and they're debating about should they leave, what should they do, should Zeitoun stay behind, what's supposed to happen, and we're reading this and thinking, go, 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 and of course we know that he doesn't do that. And then all of a sudden it shifts from this tactic of dramatic irony that we know something that they don't, to we don't know what's going on anymore either once Zeitoun is detained. And for the last half of the book, or the last third of the book, we're in the same position that the characters are in. We don't know what's going to happen. And although they're reunited at the end, we get the sense that things have changed for the worse in a way that they can never really rebuild or fix. And it's really a very mixed, bittersweet, ambivalent kind of way to end the book. I'm wondering if readers aren't in a similar position when finishing something like this. The idea of what exactly are people supposed to do. As Alden and I were talking right before the panel started, I'm really more in the position of usually asking questions rather than providing answers. So the best I can really suggest is read more. I mean, read books like Zeitoun. Try to stay informed. Don't just get information from cable news. That's my hobby horse lately, is don't watch cable news. And try to just read as much as possible and as broadly as possible. There are any number of books that when people read them, they really feel different, transformed, and like they understand something different and better afterwards. And I felt like this book was one of those, which is why I felt very strongly that students should read it.
And I think I would echo some of the other earlier sentiments, especially about active citizenship. I mean, I think we all take for granted the democracy that we live in, and that we have competent government, and especially in disasters, someone else is going to fix it. I think the experiences that the Zeitoun family went through and that we've heard about from Katrina really shows that there's no guarantee of that. The only guarantee is for citizens to call attention to it, to call for it, not so much so long after the fact and say, wow, this doesn't happen in the United States, but to be prepared beforehand, to take seriously the responsibility of citizenship when you're looking to elect officials, to hold them accountable. And when things don't go right, to make sure that they get fixed as fast as possible, and not to just move on to the next cable news argument between two different political parties. For me, I came away from the book and from the whole Hurricane Katrina disaster saying, I knew it was bad, I didn't know it was that bad, and I'm shocked by it, even as someone who works in the area of democracy. And I think it's very much a call to all of us to take our roles seriously and to hold our government, ourselves, and our neighbors and our communities accountable for each other. Because without that accountability within our citizenship, we're really left in a perilous position when disaster hits, especially when disaster hits and normal routines are disrupted.